All right, so we are going to keep working with imaginary numbers. Okay, we're going to be working with imaginary numbers for pretty much the rest of this unit. Okay, and today we are on unit 5.3. And our concept for today is we are going to solve quadratic equations. Solve quadratic equations with imaginary numbers. So today we're going to take a lot of what we did in Unit 4 and we're going to combine it with what we're doing now. So we're just going to be solving things, but instead of if we get a negative square root as an answer, instead of saying no solution, now we have a way to solve those. So remember when it says solve, that means get an x by itself. Okay, that's the only variable you're going to work with here. So for number 1, I would like you to solve x squared equals negative 13. X squared equals negative 13. So what we want to do is, a lot of times it's difficult to figure out, or some people have difficulty figuring out, how do you know when you should have everything on one side that equals 0, if you want to solve that way, or how do you know if you're going to put things like x's on one side, numbers on the other? Does anyone know? Any idea about when you do which? Usually the easiest way to solve any problem, or when we're solving quadratic equations, the easiest way to solve is actually factoring, okay? But sometimes we can't factor. Like this, if I moved it over, do you think you could factor x squared plus 13? That doesn't make any sense. So then what would be the next thing that you would want to do? You can root it, exactly. Okay, this is simple enough that to get rid of the square, we're going to root it. Now, what happens when I put in a root? Automatically put plus or minus, exactly, in your next step. Okay, so here, this just becomes x equals plus or minus root negative 13. Now, it used to be that we said we didn't know how to solve that. Okay, you don't know how to simplify it. But we do now. Now we can use i's. So, you still have plus or minus. Okay, still x equals plus or minus. Does the I go in front of the plus or minus or after it?
In front.
After it. Okay, I root 13. Okay, we're not adding or subtracting. Okay, the I is still attached to the root 13 by multiplication. Okay, remember, we're not adding or subtracting. It should be attached by multiplication. That's your answer. Okay, so plus or minus I root 13. That is 2 answers, so be careful there. Okay, let's try another one. For number 2, again, I want you to solve x squared plus 11 equals 3. X squared plus 11 equals 3. Any ideas? What do you think I'm going to do to solve? David?
Subtract 11.
Subtract 11, exactly. So start by subtracting 11. Maybe. Okay, subtract 11. It's going to leave us with x squared equals negative 8. Then how do I get rid of a square? Root both sides. Make sure you put in plus or minus. Okay, that's the biggest thing that people will forget. You'll only get half the points and half the answers because people forget to put in the plus or minus. Okay, it's a really, really big mistake, so be careful. Now, what can I take out of an 8? Or, well, first we can take out an I, thank you. So I root 8. Then, can I take anything else out? Take out a 2 and a 4, 2 2's, so that means I can take out a pair of 2's. They go in front of the I, so we should get x equals plus or minus 2I root 8. Okay, and that's the answer that we're looking for. 2. Sorry, 2. I'm sorry. Plus or minus 2I root 2. Okay, anyone have questions so far? So we're just solving things like we've always solved, but now we can take it a step further because you have i's available. Okay, let's try another one for number 3. I want you to try 3x squared equals negative 81. 3x squared equals negative 81. Okay, so I'm looking for a first step. What is my first step? First step, David. Divide by 3, exactly. Okay, so divide both sides by 3. Okay, what is negative 81 divided by 3? Negative 27. Okay, then to undo the square, you're going to root both sides. Remember to put in the plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus, and I can take out an I. Still have root 27. 27 breaks down to 9 and 3, and 9 breaks down to 3 and 3. You can take out a pair of 3's, excuse me. So we should get an answer of x equals plus or minus 3i root 3. Okay, plus or minus 3i root 3. Anybody have questions so far? Did I lose anybody so far? Hopefully not. Okay, let's try another one for number 4. I want you to solve 5x squared plus 33 equals 3. 5x squared plus 33 equals 3. So what would be my first step? Haley. Perfect. Subtract the 33 from both sides. Okay, if you subtract 33, we got 5x squared equals negative 30. Okay, where do I go from there? Nicole. Exactly. Divide by 5. So we're starting to get the x squareds by themselves, or the x by itself. So x squared equals, it's going to be negative 6. And then finally, root both sides. So got rid of the square. So x equals plus or minus, don't forget the plus or minus, I root 6. Okay, so x is equal to plus or minus I root 6. Yes, ma'am.
So if we can just put plus or minus I root 6, or do we just put x?
You do not have to, oh, you're saying do you have to put the x equals part? Just the answer's fine. You don't have to. If you write x equals, that's fine, but you don't have to. Okay. Try another one for number 5. Sorry. Number 5, I want you to try 2x squared plus 18 equals 72. Negative 72. Sorry. 2x squared plus 18 equals negative 72. Where do I start? What is my first step? Vanessa. Start by subtracting 18. Exactly. Now, since these are both subtraction on the right side, that means you're actually adding and keeping the sign. So this becomes negative 90. Okay, what's my next step? Jeremy. Perfect. Divide by 2. Okay, divide by 2. That leaves us with x squared equals negative 45. Then root both sides. If you root both sides, we get x equals, don't forget the plus or minus. Take out an I. We're left with root 45. 45 breaks down to be 5 and 9. And 9 breaks down to 3 and 3. So that means we can take out a pair of 3's. So we should get an answer of x equals plus or minus 3i root 5. And that's your answer there. Do we have any questions so far? No, so we're just combining stuff that we've learned previously with i's, basically. Okay, now I'm going to give you a little bit different kinds of problems here. Okay, for number 6, again, we're still solving. And I want you to solve x squared, and this is in parentheses, plus 5x minus 1 quantity squared, so that means in parentheses squared, equals 25. X squared plus 5x minus 1 quantity squared equals 25. Anyone have any ideas where you think I'm going to start here? Okay, we can't distribute the exponent, because remember, you can only distribute an exponent if it's a monomial, so if there's nothing attached by a plus or minus.
You write that twice.
We do not write this out twice. Well, I'm sorry, you could, but then you'd have a trinomial times a trinomial. So that sounds like it might be kind of messy. It is possible, but not what we really want to do. We can Q this, okay? This can be a quantity. So if I change this to be a Q, Q squared equals 25. Where do you think I go from there? If we want to get rid of a square, how do I get rid of a square? Root it. Okay, so if you root this, put in your plus or minus, we would get Q equals plus or minus 5. Now, when I replace this, okay, so basically I'm saying Q equals 5 and Q equals negative 5. Correct? Are we good to there? Okay, we have 2 different answers. Then when you replace it, I get x squared plus 5x minus 1 equals 5. And x squared plus 5x minus 1 equals negative 5. Does this look familiar to you? Because it should. Okay, this should look very similar to what we did in the last unit. So what would be my next step? Martha, what do you think is my next step? Say it again, Tori.
Move the 5 over and set it to 0.
Move it over and set it to 0. This is exactly what we did in our last unit, okay? So we want to set this equal to 0, okay? So subtract the 5. On this side, you're going to add the 5, okay? So for this side, we get x squared plus 5x minus 6 equals 0. Then factor and solve. So that factors to give you x plus 6 times x minus 1 equals 0. Set each part equal to 0, and we get a negative 6 and a positive 1. That's what we did last unit. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. Add it, so x squared plus 5x, negative 1 plus 5 gives you plus 4 equals 0. That is factorable. And we got x plus 1 and x plus 4. Then set each part equal to 0, negative 1 and negative 4. So here you have 4 different answers. Okay, we do get 4 different answers here. Questions? Do we have any questions so far?